Good afternoon, good afternoon to my friends on the East Coast, and good morning to my friends on the West Coast. Welcome to the Just Us Coordinating Council Speaker Series. I am your host, Ronald Simpson Bay. I serve as the Executive Vice President of Strategic Partnerships for Just Leadership USA. I'm also a member of the Just Us Coordinating Council, or JCC as we like to call it. The JCC is the first of its kind national policy table created by and for individuals impacted by the criminal legal system. Over the course of the last year, we have built a table where everyone is welcome and all who are invited have a seat at the table. A table where we collectively can leverage our lived experience as the expertise that it is. It is an absolute pleasure to be with you here today on one of many powerful events that we have taken place this year. Today's speaker series features the United States Department of Energy's Office of Energy, Justice, and Equity. The DOE representatives will be highlighting pathways to employment in the energy sector in both private and public settings. I am joined today by our speakers, Ben Horn and Beverly Kuykendall. I'd like to welcome you both. Before we dive into today's session, I want to take a moment to orient those of you joining the call today to exactly why the JCC is truly a first of its kind approach to policy. First slide, please. Thank you, David. Go to slide. The JCC is a national federal policy table led by and created by individuals who are directly impacted. In April 2023, the Justice Coordinating Council was launched as a national collective led by system impacted leaders, community members, and national organizations who no longer demand a seat at the table, but are interested in building our own table. The JCC forms the connective tissue needed to catalyze full participation in policy practices and changes for formerly incarcerated people and directly impacted individuals and their communities. Next slide, please. The voices of those most impacted by the criminal legal system have been missing and or excluded from the decision-making tables. There is a persistent relationship between poverty, inequity, and mass incarceration. For too long, the people closest to the problem have been closest to the solution, but furthest from resources and power to advance positive change. Shifting the status quo requires investing in the sustained leadership of people directly impacted by the criminal legal system and standing alongside them to propel change. We work with who we call the Weebies. We be here when you be gone. The Weebies are those who are lifelong government workers in federal agencies. We engage with them to act as thought partners on behalf of directly impacted population on how to advance the needs of directly impacted people through different department initiatives. Next slide, please. To adequately start addressing the harms caused by the criminal legal system, the JCC works to create pathways of access and resources within each of these policy areas here on the screen before you. Next slide. Our mission is to enhance the quality of life for justice impacted individuals and their communities in order to restore human dignity. We do this by dismantling the racist policies that uphold systemic oppression and marginalization that are rooted in racial inequalities. Today, we will focus on employment and training opportunities. Next slide. As part of this process, we will first start talking to my good friend Ben from the DOE to help center this conversation back to the people which are most impacted by the criminal legal system. Ben, would you come on and introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Ben. I'm with the Office of Energy, Justice, and Equity in the Minority Business and Workforce Division, and I'm pleased to be here today. This is a topic I'm very passionate about.
Thank you. So, Ben, how did your team begin intersecting in the workforce development lane with individuals who are directly impacted in organizations that serve us?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I mean, the administration began with Justice 40, which I'll dive into, once I explain more about our program office in the Department of Energy. But it began at the executive level, and then it went down to our Director Baker, and my chief, Shalea Morissette. They were both passionate about the topic, and I had a couple years of experience working with reentry, and like many people in the country, have had family and friends affected by the whole system and the incarceration recidivism cycle that's just devastated our nation. And so, because we had similar passions and a mandate from at the very top, we started designing programs to help facilitate conversations, strategies for business leaders, for nonprofit leaders, and for folks looking for careers and jobs themselves. So started at the top, but also we had people, friends, family, neighbors affected by this, and we wanted to start to make a difference from the energy angle. So it's a great question. I'll just dive into introducing the Department of Energy generally, and also the Office of Energy Justice and Equity a little bit more specifically, talking about grants and prizes and some strategies that could be helpful for a variety of folks in the audience. And then we'll talk about careers. But I just want to emphasize today's an introduction conversation. I'm always available to answer more questions, as is the rest of my team. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, okay. So our office, the Office of Energy Justice and Equity, our mission is to identify and implement ways of ensuring that everyone is afforded an opportunity to participate fully in the DOE's programs, opportunities, resources. So we're going to go to the next slide here just to introduce our team. Yeah, so this is our division within the office. Our office is around 110 employees now. So we're a small division focusing on minority businesses, workforce development, also nonprofits. So we're one small division amongst several in EJE. Excuse me. And I like to say the EJE itself is small but mighty, but our team is also small but mighty. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So I'm going to start broad at the Department of Energy. Don't worry about trying to read every square, every text. The idea here is just to represent how big and vast and broad the Department of Energy is. We work on everything from science, research, and development to regulation. I'm not going to go into an in-depth history here, but started in 1977. And excuse me, as you're aware, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act you're probably aware, has radically changed the way the Department of Energy and the rest of the federal government does business as we seek to decarbonize and repair and rebuild our infrastructure. But I like to also explain to folks, just in an armchair setting, nothing too formal, that if you understand, the Department of Defense gets a lot of attention from the media or the movies, and I'm not a military guy, but if you can imagine how complex and massive the Department of Defense is, Department of Energy is second to them. And so there's a lot of independent silos that come together to coordinate different projects or operations, kind of like if you've seen movies with the special operations or something. And so there is some cross-pollination, but at the end of the day, all of our program offices are focusing on their own tasks. And so our office, the Office of Energy, Justice, and Equity, I like to often say we're like a customer service division for disadvantaged communities and businesses to help them navigate the Byzantine complex silos of the Department of Energy and understand some of the funding opportunities, tax credits, loans, contracting opportunities, just to understand and to introduce them to the right direction based on the needs of their community and the needs of their business. And so, yeah, we're small but mighty. We're cross-cutting. I always also have to emphasize that we do not have a budget for programs. A good number of these squares that you see here, the different program offices, they do have budgets. And so what we like to do is introduce different people to those opportunities that are the best fit for them. So Inflation Reduction Act, $370 billion. It did not all go to the Department of Energy, but a good number of it did. There's also Department of Transportation, EPA, FAA, et cetera, opportunities that exist. And then, of course, you have 1.2 trillion in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, or also known as BILL, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And similar to that, not all of the money came to the Department of Energy, but a lot of it did. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we go into grant strategies. That a lot of folks are here because they're excited to talk about careers in energy, or maybe they're a business owner looking at opportunities in contracting or grants or prizes. Keep in mind, though, some of the things you do and things that your company specializes in may be a better fit for seeking subcontracts with the Department of Defense, or maybe grant opportunities through agriculture. Maybe you're at this intersection where you fit both of those offices and those departments. And so try to think broadly, that not everything is nestled, not all of the money from the public infrastructure work the administration has been pushing is centered in the Department of Energy. So just want to keep that in mind. So next slide, please, is important. Maybe we're just down a little bit. That's okay. This is also meant to be an introduction here. How Department of Energy procures and funds is broad. We could talk about contracting for 6 hours, but instead we have Miss Beverly Kuykendall today just to talk for about 20 minutes. And we'll have Q&A, of course. It's a longer session, but same with grants. I'm not a grant specialist, but I introduce people to what grants are available. And so we could talk for 6 hours about different grants. I'm also not a tax expert. Sometimes we do introduce folks to tax credits as a strategy to fund their projects. But I'm not a financial consultant either. I can only introduce opportunities to CDFIs. But there's so many opportunities out there. And I just want to emphasize, our office is here to serve you. And so at the end, you'll get my email. You can email me or my team. We are available and we're passionate to help with this. But I do want to go into some tips today. And so, yeah, there's different oversights and tips to help make grants and prizes more competitive as you're also looking into career paths in energy. We're going to talk about those and kind of define things a little bit to see how different tracks may be more appropriate for your setting. So I know there's a broad audience here. So let's go to the next slide, though, to dive in a little bit more to the differences of, grants. Okay, good. So I think our slides are a little bit out of order, but it's totally fine. So Justice 40 is incredibly important. I'm glad. I was worried that this got deleted. So Justice 40 is an incredible executive order that stipulates 40% of the overall benefits from recent funding through Bill, IRA, also the CHIPS and Science Act, have to flow to disadvantaged communities. So if we go to the next slide to look in more deeply about how that's defined, good, okay. So the question is always, how are these benefits defined, and how are disadvantaged communities defined? And that's really a long discussion, but a quick Google search, or if you want these slides, you'll also have access to them, can show there's a lot of covered programs and investments that are very, very broad in terms of defining the 40% of the overall benefits flowing to disadvantaged communities. So if you look at the covered programs, that could go from anything in climate change and clean energy, efficiency, transportation, storage, especially workforce development and training. So that's something we're passionate about today. So you can imagine if, I'm just speaking practical examples here. If you're a nonprofit and you have a reentry workforce development pre-apprenticeship that you're partnering with a larger factory, the two of you could kind of come together, and we'll talk more about this, to argue, hey, here's how we're representing Justice 40 interest in our partnership. We're meeting this need, they're meeting that need, etc. And so Justice 40 is really incredibly powerful. It is only an executive order, but a lot of times so another question people ask always, I'm just kind of preempting your questions maybe, is, hey, I thought executive orders only stay with the administration. What happens if there's a different president, or who knows, and that's out of our control. But typically when there's something that is as broad as and impactful as Justice 40 in developing our infrastructure and workforce, it sticks around from administration to administration. And sometimes it takes many years before that's converted from an executive order to law. It really just depends. So we hope it stays, but it's very likely that it will. So I want to talk a little bit more about defining disadvantaged communities. If we could go to the next slide. Yes, good. Okay, so there's a couple maps here. If you follow this link in your own time, this is going to be incredibly important to narrow in on your specific census tract or the different census tracts that your company or your project or your correctional facility may represent. And so if you look at the map on the left, we call it CJEST, the Climate Energy Justice Screening Tool. Excuse me, this was a tool developed by the White House to narrow in on the different thresholds of what environmental burdens, what general poverty definitions could say to a community to argue that they are disadvantaged by a certain threshold. And each one of the thresholds has to have a combination of low income with something else. And so if you look at the left map, that's the one that we primarily introduce people to with the guidance. The Department of Energy also has a disadvantaged community map, which is helpful. If you look on the right, though, the blue only, that's the Department of Energy's. And so sometimes you may not be represented in one or the other, but use these to argue in your grant applications, in your prize applications, or in your attempts to win government contracts to say, here's the community we're representing, and here's how we're serving them, and here's how our business is making a difference. It's not just, shareholder profit or something. This is far beyond just making a buck here. We're actually impacting the community based on the needs that we've researched. And you can print that off in your applications, copy and paste it into there. So that's a really important resource that you will not waste a minute if you spend any time on it. So just follow back with the link and you can do your own homework there. Next slide, please. So in addition to the 40% of the overall benefits of all the funding coming through Bill, IRA, CHIPS, and Science, every applicant to a grant or a prize, and we'll define grants and prizes in just a second, but every applicant to contracts, they have to prove that they have a robust community benefits plan. And that community benefits plan, it's actually anywhere from 15 to 20% of the overall technical merit of their application. So if someone has I've reviewed many applications, and folks in my position, we can tell if someone's not done the research to really understand how their business can impact their community. And if we grade them low, then they miss critical points, and that puts someone else ahead of them. Of course, you need to be technically sound. Of course, you need to have a track record proving that you're doing what you claim to do, and there is a due diligence process for that. But central to that has to also show that your community benefits plan is serving the needs of the people. And really, there's 4 core policy priorities that, again, if you do just a quick Google search, there's a lot of good information out there about investing in the workforce, engaging with community, with labor, so unions, advancing equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, and implementing Justice 40. Each of those have different ways to define different definitions based on the needs of the community and in the abilities of the company or the project. But this is a chance for you to be creative. So I like to say this is not just like an ethical requirement for community development. It's also not just good business strategy, but it's now required by policy. And so it's something where if you're passionate about your community, this is your chance to infuse community development and economic development principles into your business if you're not doing that already. So next slide, please. I want to see what order we're at. Okay, good. Okay, so now this is high level. Some of you may already know this really well, like the back of your hand. I just want to break this down for those who may be new, because there's a broad audience, as we've said. So there's 2 broad different types of grants, formula and discretionary. Formula, I like to say, just think formulaic. They're like a mathematical formula. They're slower to change. They come out by law. They're statutorily defined annually through the congressional appropriations processes. So if you've seen in the news the threats to shut down the government, to fund the government because of the debt ceiling limits, et cetera, that's usually because annually there's a discussion about what sort of grants we need to see to fund the different institutions of our government, the federal and executive branch. And that flows down from federal level to states to local communities. And so Department of Labor, for example, has a different workflow to all the way go down to American Job Centers and the different service providers that contract with them. And there's a very clear delineation of how these formula grants trickle down to the local community and opportunities there. Discretionary funds, and if you think of the word like it's at the discretion of the program office or the administration to decide who wins, and it's based on competitive or non-competitive or even cooperative processes. So if you look on the different program offices of the Department of Energy, and there's many of them, there's funding opportunities that are frequently updated. And so these are often, I don't want to say they're easier, but they're newer, they're updated, there's more project specific. And often these are kind of a better angle for someone that's new to doing business with the government. So this is like probably insulting to some of the people in the room because they know this so well already. I just wanted to lay that out because a lot of people do ask that. If we can go to the next slide, please. So grants versus prizes. There's a lot we could talk about here about the differences, but I, again, want to keep it real simple. So typically prizes are smaller amounts, and the volume of opportunities are also smaller. There's usually a lot more grants. There's a lot more funding for the different program offices in the Department of Energy to implement their grants. But there are several places where you can find really nice opportunities for those who are new to doing business with the government to get into prizes. Typically, they are much, I don't want to say much easier, but they're a little bit easier to apply for. There's a lot less paperwork, and the monitoring evaluation processes are almost unknown for prizes. It's you apply, and as long as you meet the criterion, you get the cash, and you can use it as you need to implement your project. Grants, usually there's a process to implement, and it comes out in different stages based on performance. Usually they're both very technical and process driven, but usually grants have a much longer process and are much more technical and a much more of a heavy lift. And also prizes are sometimes a combination of public and private funds, but grants are always public. So experience matters for both of these, but again, the intent of a prize is to really introduce people to opportunities that maybe they didn't have before, or they're not new. They're newer to doing business with the government, is what I like to say. And so if we go to the next slide, please. Yeah, typically grants are far less centralized. There are many different locations, but besides the different program offices, the most central place to look for is grants.gov. There are also department-specific grant and funding opportunity announcements, like the Department of Justice would have some. For the Department of Energy, this is program office specific. Prizes, though, there's really two main places. The EERE, the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office within the Department of Energy, has a nice set of prizes, but also the American-made challenges on HeroX.com. That's one of our favorite go-tos. We'll go into a couple of examples, and later on when we're having a conversation about more specific strategies of what angle, what direction do we want to go when we're looking for a prize or when we're looking for a grant. I'll talk about some specific strategies when we have more of a conversation with Bev. But if we could go to the next slide, just to briefly show you, so the upskill for solar manufacturing in workforce, this has been closed for now, but we're told another round is going to come soon. And I want to lay this out because people think, oh, solar, well, I don't just want to be a solar installer, or what's going to happen when all of the rooftops in America are filled with solar panels? Then there's no jobs for installers. But really, if you think of the entire supply chain of an industry, getting into solar, whether it's from manufacturing or from the installation side, there's great opportunities to work up to different levels in the industry. There's a lot of software that's needed for a lot of the smart grids. There is there's going to be repairs. There's also the business and marketing side. And there's many states and many programs that have integrated solar technician up to a journeyman, which sometimes is a 4+ year process that provides really good and union stable jobs. So I want people to think creatively. This prize also seeks to capture that. It's upskill for solar manufacturing. If you go to the website, there's a lot of information about it, but what I like about this little slide here is it shows the different rounds for the timeline. So typically round one, there's going to be a lot more people applying. It'll be a bigger group and a smaller amount of funds. But let's say, the first 30 people or the first 30 folks who win, they're going to get, let's say, $2,000. I don't know. I can't remember the specific number here because the total prize is $5 million, but I can't remember how this breaks down. And then if they get to round two, then it's a smaller pool of candidates competing for that larger amount of funds, and same for round three. And I think it's up to 500,000 total between the three rounds, but don't quote me on that. I'm not an expert on all details of this specific prize, though I do love it. So keep your eyes open for this one. It's on the herox.com. They're called the American Made Prize or American Made Challenges. And each challenge or each prize is different. Next one, just as another example, if we go to the next slide, please. So the eScrap or Electronic Scrap Recycling Advancement Prize. This one is open now, and it has the similar, three-phase incubate, prototype, demonstrate, where each phase is defined based on different characteristics and needs. But again, a prize is more accessible. Usually, it's simpler application process, much simpler application process, and easier to be awarded those funds and to get started. I'll talk more about strategy specifics later, but I want to just pause for a question or a transition moment here.
Yeah. I mean, thanks. That was some great information you shared with us, Ben. And there was a lot of. I do have a few follow-up questions, but you talked about solar energy, and a lot of people's first thoughts when they talk about workforce development in the energy sector is solar energy. Could you share with us more about other careers in the energy and entry points into this industry?
That's really good. Yeah. So later I'm going to show a career map. Unless we want to dive into that now, I think that's later. Even though the slides are a little out of order and I'm probably going over time, but I used to do a lot of work in reentry communities and just mentoring and also with youth, also overseas and working in Arabic communities with workforce development and business coaching. And, I've had the privilege to learn from a lot of incredible people and their stories of resilience and learning. Because sometimes options are not available to folks with criminal records, depending on the different laws in the states and the states and communities are in. It's extremely frustrating and bewildering and complex. But if there's an opportunity for you, whether you're still serving your time or you're under community supervision and or even if you just have a record and you've been out for a long time, start with something that could be useful. And I'll show a couple links where you can do some research. But for example, I was talking to a young man recently, and he had the opportunity to get a free welding course. And I can't remember what that opportunity was. I'm based in Minneapolis now. I just moved here. But so he had a free welding course, and then it set him up to be more competitive for automotive body shop course, where he was more competitive because he could use that as a combination. And then someone sponsored him because he had this 1-2 skill set and he wants to get into EVs to do body work because right now we're building and buying brand new EVs, but what's going to happen in 5 years when we've got a lot of nice used cars and batteries are cheaper? And so we're prolonging the lives of these EV cars. We're going to need folks to work on them. And so he's a young guy with this vision that had other opportunities and doors closed to him, but he's looking at it creatively because of some of the opportunities that were presented to him. Other times, I knew a gentleman who was an educator and got into motorcycle mechanics and painting. And there's the local county jail here has simulating painting certificates where they can do all the work while they're in the jail before they even go on, whether it's to whatever happens after pre-detention. So painting could be a great way to just initially get into the energy sector, believe it or not, because you're getting hired by a team. They see your work ethic, they see how good you are, and then they realize, oh, you're actually good at these steps. And so let's continue on with the presentation, unless you had another question, because there's a career map that lays some of these steps out that are more helpful than just ideas. But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of industry. Okay, so this is really helpful. So the 2024 USEER report, the United States Energy and Employment Report, is coming out soon. But I'm able to talk briefly about it. And right now, construction was the nation's #1 growing energy job for like 3 years. 3 years previous. It's anticipated, though, that that's going to taper down, and that manufacturing, which was second, will also kind of continue at a steady rate, and then construction will be replaced with utilities. Now, construction is very broad, right? You have residential, you have, you could be a lineman, and you could also go into a journeyman electrician route through a lineman route as well. Lineman, I can't remember the time frame, but it's a lot shorter to become a lineman, just a few months even, than it is to become a journeyman. And so the utilities right now are exploding. I think most people know that currently, before we decommission a lot of the different coal plants, utilities are having a hard time meeting current demand. And so I hope not, but there may be brownouts and blackouts may become a more common thing as the utilities adjust. Well, a lot of folks are having a hard time hiring. In 2021, there was 14 million new job postings and only 6 million applicants. This is rough numbers from memory. And so what I'm saying is there's a massive worker shortage right now before the demographic challenges of baby boomers leaving the trades. And so there are just endless opportunities now that are just going to continue. And so I want to keep that in mind. If you follow this link, it's nice to kind of just spend even just 30 minutes and see what are some of the trends in hiring lately. What are the automotive and electric vehicle and battery recycling manufacturing supply chain doing? What's going on in hydrogen? What's going on in utilities? Because as we create more high voltage transmission lines and more unique storage for larger utility scale and community scale battery storage, there's just going to be massive amounts of new jobs as we upgrade our grid. And so they're going to need the utilities are going to need a massive amount of new workforce. And this is a good report that the Department of Energy publishes every year to capture some of these trends. And I want to highlight one figure here. In the 2023 report, and I think this is the same for 2024, formerly incarcerated compose only 1% of the energy workforce compared to 2% for the total workforce. I mean, this is a massive opportunity that if second chance hires and employers could understand, really, they could capture this untapped talent pool, which, quoting a friend and colleague, Jeffrey Korzenik, the economist, there's just massive opportunities here. And I also want to highlight that these energy jobs, they're split across 5 technical or technological areas: energy power generation, EPG, or transmission, distribution, and storage, or TDS, fuels, energy efficiency, and motor vehicles, and in 9 different industries. So you have mining and extraction. That's an industry that serves different technical areas. You've got construction that serves almost all of them. You've got wholesale trade and distribution and transportation that also touches all 5 of the technical areas. Then you've got agriculture and forestry, which touches actually a wide variety of them in a massive amount of geographic spaces. Also, the whole country, think of Middle America, is huge. There's many opportunities here. And then, of course, utilities and manufacturing. So this is, again, just as an introduction, just to kind of get creative and brainstorm, but there's many opportunities there. And starting with this link, it's a great way to look back and see what hiring trends have been like in the year before. So if we could go to the next slide, please. And I want to pause, Ron, if you had another question before we go to sharing the screen here, or should we save this for a different part?
Let's save this for a follow-up. I mean, I do have some follow-up questions. I want to get.
I've talked way too much. Yeah.
I'm going to get to Beverly right quick, but we're going to bring you back in, and I want to do some follow-up questions on some of the stuff you just shared, because it spurred some thoughts in my mind. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
And thank you for helping us understand not just the department's essential work in this space, but also for the role of jobs and energy in our lives and our communities. For those of us joining today, it may also be surprising to learn that direct employment, like what we have highlighted last month with the CDC, is not only a pathway to employment opportunities with the federal government and Department of Energy. And I would like to welcome Beverly to the discussion. Thank you again, Beverly, for your joining us. Would you please share with us more about the opportunities that exist in government as well as in the energy sector for contracting?
Absolutely. Many thanks to you both. And Ben, that was great information. I will tell you that as a practitioner, I've been involved in federal procurement and federal contracting for about 30 years. And the question I always ask, right, because there's so much excitement that's around all of the opportunities and all of the ideas. And the question I always challenge us all with is, how do we actually execute? What's the implementation strategy? With all of the information that's available to us and all the wonderful work that's being done across a broad spectrum of suppliers and providers, how can we really look at that and say, where is an opportunity for me? And that's where LZB comes in, right? In federal contracting, I always challenge people to ask for, you get excited about the idea, it sounds wonderful. The next question we should always ask ourselves is, oh, how? How do I really get there, right? How do I move from idea, I'll say from excitement or legislation, executive order, to excitement, to idea, but how do I use that to really, forgot to sit up there because it skips, no problem. So how do I really use that to impact the bottom line? How do I use that to really get to what I want to accomplish? In other words, what's in it for me as an organization, and how do I get there? What's in it for me as an individual, and how do I get there? These are questions that I challenge all of us across a broad spectrum to continue to ask ourselves, because that will lead you to asking the right question to the people that are presenting the information. If I can start with my first slide, and we'll go from there. There we go. You can go to the next one. So what I've challenged myself and my team over the past 30 years is to really work alongside the federal, state, local governments, as well as nonprofits, but private entities and individuals, right? Because we have to transform Executive 14008 and 13057. We have to transform that and to say, how do we really benefit our communities? What will it take? Now that we have the general idea, we have the framework, we know the support is there, what is the very next thing that needs to happen? How do we bridge the gap between the promise of government opportunity and the economic impact? Next slide, please. There are a number of ways to do that, and I've been asked to just define what some of those might be. So in federal contracting, there is an opportunity for us to be prime contractors. And a prime contractor, and I work with many of them, right? We just secured a $110 million contract with Department of Homeland Security. We just secured an $18 million contract for FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And we also have a $40 million contract with the Navy as a prime contractor. A prime contractor is the entity that wins a direct contract with the federal government, which in layman terms just means the government pays me directly. I have a contract with the government. I perform on that contract, and the government pays me. What is a subcontractor? And I'm going to tie all this together in the next couple of slides. So what's a subcontractor? A subcontractor is engaged by the prime contractor. They have no direct privity with the federal government. And their relationship is only with the prime contractor, and the subcontractor is paid by the prime contractor. So what's been said before is that the government, through the Department of Energy, has a number of different pathways for you to participate. You can participate as a prime contractor. You can participate as a subcontractor. You can participate as someone who is writing or responding to a grant. Can you go to the next slide, please? Where I think some real opportunities exist, though, for the community benefits plan. So if you are a nonprofit and you're looking at Justice 40, and you're excited about that because you know that that's part of your constituency. You are servicing those disadvantaged communities. Why not? And you know that there are a number of prime contractors out there, and the prime contractor has to include Justice 40, a community benefits plan. Why not represent yourself to those prime contractors, which you can probably get a list of from Department of Energy, some of those companies that are winning these large contracts, and have a way to matchmake with them so that you can present your community benefits plan through what your organization provides to help them meet their requirements as a prime contractor. To me, it's a no-brainer. It's an exciting opportunity, and it gets you to the how. So you can't get to anywhere without saying the how. We know what the why is. They've explained it. We know what it is. But how do you really get to the rubber meets the road? Because at the end of this presentations, right, you'll be going back to Ron and you'll be saying, Ron, well, how? How do I really tap in? And then Ron will tap into his resources through the Department of Energy because that's who they know. And they'll be able to really sit down and figure out for you how you can really play. Some of the key pathwords with doing business in the government, there are a number of different ways. How do you become a subcontractor? How do you become a prime contractor? How do I really get to some of these opportunities that I'll see based on those entities within the Department of Energy, who has a tremendous budget? So they contract with prime contractors to help them meet their mission of energy conservation, to help meet their mission of exercising some of the tenets of Executive Order 14008. Unsolicited proposal. If you look further into the Department of Energy's guidelines, they have a guide, which I thought was wonderful, for unsolicited proposal. You have an innovative idea and you want to present it according to certain criteria to Department of Energy. They have an unsolicited proposal pathway where you can actually talk about what it is you're trying to achieve according to their mission, and you can develop and submit an unsolicited proposal. This is something that LZB does with large companies and also with cities and states and local governments. You can also become a prime contractor. How do they really get to their mission? They do that by soliciting and awarding contracts. What is it that they need that you actually can do, or that your constituency can do? And if it's related to, everything is related to Justice 40, how do you write Justice 40 into that contracting plan? What does it need to look like? Who do you need to talk to in order to tell them, listen, you're working on a water desalination project and you want to submit a grant or you want to submit a contract? Here's what my organization does. We have a community benefits plan. We can be that part of your contract by exercising that plan with you in response to your contract. It's a beautiful way. I call it being the prettiest girl in the room. So many contractors and so many grant writers haven't thought about that. They might be able to do it themselves, but if you already have a CBP, because you're already awarding or working with that constituency, what a wonderful opportunity to partner. The key is to get you in the same room. And I've seen the Department of Energy do this through a couple of summits. I'm from Southern California. The Department of Energy partnered with Southern California Gas Company, and they put on a joint program where they matched CBPs with large potential prime contractors to help them work together, because the prime contractors didn't already have a CBP plan. But how wonderful to be able to already partner with an organization that's been doing it for many years because it's part of their mission. Subcontracting is another key pathway to doing business with the Department of Energy, with any federal agency or city or state or local government. Subcontracting, you have something that is part of the prime contractor and what they need, they can subcontract to you. But how can they do that if they don't know what and who you are and what you do? That's where I talk about conferences and workshops that Department of Energy is putting on, almost seems like a daily basis. They have those that occur in person. They have those that occur virtually. But the key is understanding what is it that they're trying to accomplish, and what is it that what can you do to make sure that you're meeting that goal? Again, getting to, and I'm sorry to use narrative and jargon, but really getting to the nitty gritty, right? Really getting to the how. Wonderful, good helicopter overarching information. Now, how do you take that information as an organization or as an individual to make an economic impact, which is really what these executive orders are about? How do we make an economic impact to make sure that people are really being able to benefit from it? And the same with grants. I'm working on. I never do anything alone. All of those contracts I talked about, I didn't do those alone. It was a contingent of folks getting in a room, just like what Ron said earlier and what Ben alluded to earlier, getting in a room, looking at the idea, whiteboarding it, and then looking at all of the resources that are available that you can plug in to really turn that idea into a contract or a grant to meet the need. That's where I think we really need to be. And that's what I get excited about. Rather than going away and saying, great, that was a great presentation. What I'd like to see as an outcome is people knocking down Ben's door and knocking down Ron's door and saying, okay, guys, the how. Here's what I do. Please lead me to the right opportunity. Now, the Department of Energy, and Ben said it so well, is so keyed in to into the opportunities. I've watched Shalea, for example, team. She brings in all these disparate parties with the same mission, sits them down in a room, and then she walks away because she understands what each is trying to accomplish. But unless you get the right people in the room, you just kind of go around in circles. So we're working now with the city of North Miami Beach on grants for desalination. There are many opportunities throughout not only Department of Energy, but through the Environmental Protection Agency. But that took sitting down and really understanding not just the grant writing, but what's the mission? What are we trying to accomplish? How do we really make an economic impact? How do we achieve, at the end of the day, people who have been left out of the opportunity, really getting them to the table so that at some point they can say, yes, I got it. Here's what I got out of the situation. Getting the right people in the room to talk. Absolutely, Ben. Thank you so very much. Can we go to the next slide, please? So Justice 40, what Ben talked about, is to me is a whole of government initiative. It is something that we already have the parts and pieces. The key is getting the right people in the room. So the way I break it down really simply is by saying you have a prime contractor. That prime contractor has a requirement for a community benefits plan. They don't have time to put that together themselves. Why not partner them with the right people? I promise you all my stuff is on airplane mode. I don't know what's happening. But at any rate, I will just say Justice 40 is really exciting because you already have people across the board that have been working to benefit their local communities, their grassroots. They've been working for many, many years. They already have programs and plans together that putting them together with a potential prime contractor or a potential grantee is the perfect solution, and it shortcuts all of this. You don't have to do it all yourself. And the challenge is getting the right people in the right room at the right time to really talk about these ideas. And the question should be what? The question should be how? How and what's next? Go to the next slide, please. I think that's the end of mine. Yep, that's what I wanted to say. I want to challenge everyone that is participating, either as a panelist or as someone who's joining the virtual meeting. Challenge each and every one of us about the opportunity to execute on an idea. And ideas are great. But where does the rubber meet the road? And we can only get there by asking how. Absolutely. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks you so much, Beverly. You made a comment about where the rubber meets the road. And my follow-up question is kind of along that line. In your company mission statement, part of it you said is to bridge the gap between the promise of government opportunity and economic impact. But oftentimes in the directly impacted communities, there's a gap between the opportunity and the ability to apply for the opportunity. So I'm just curious, are there any resources or workshops available to help guide people through the application process for any of these opportunities?
Thank you for asking that question. So there are a couple, right? And Ben and I talked about them yesterday. So there are three I'd like to talk about right now. One is the Apex Accelerators. This is an organization that's put together by the federal government for resources for people who want to understand how to do business with the federal government. They're located regionally. APEX Accelerator, ACCELERATORS. Ben, I think I sent you that yesterday. You might be able to put, I can put it in the chat. .gov. Great opportunity. Look, they have been in place for years. They used to be called PTACs, Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. Now they're called Apex Accelerators. They are already funded, and their mission is to bring new entrants into federal contracting and to provide the resources that they need for how to do business with the federal government. They start from the ground. Another great resource is the Small Business Administration, SBA.gov. The Small Business Administration has a plethora of programs that really cater to prime and subcontractors. So they have programs for socioeconomic groups, women-owned, all geared towards small business. Women-owned small business, WOSB. Economically disadvantaged, women-owned small business, EDWOSB. I'll put all these in the chat later because I can't walk and chew bubblegum at the same time, right? Hub zone, small business, historically underutilized business zone. If your business is located in a disadvantaged area that's already pre-identified by the federal government and you want to be a prime contractor, and you get preferences with the federal government by being in a hub zone. If you're a woman-owned small business, you get preferences in the federal government by being a woman-owned small business that limit the competition. That's what you really want to do. You don't want to compete with everybody. Again, I say you want to be the prettiest girl in the room. And if you're a man, you could be the prettiest girl in the room because you have a special dispensation. You are a service, disabled, veteran, owned small business, SDVOSB, tremendous opportunities within the federal government and with the Department of Veterans Affairs, who has 157 VA medical centers and over 1,300 community-based outpatient clinics, right? They buy medical supplies and equipment on a regular basis. They buy facilities management. If you're an SDVOSB, a service-able veteran-owned small business, they have to come to you first. They have to come to you before they go to anybody else. They're the prettiest girl in the room. There's another segment called the Section 8, Paragraph A of the Small Business Act. All of this is explained under SBA.gov, run by Director Guzman, the Small Business Administration.gov. They even have platforms and programs. They have a federal contracting 101 class that you can participate in. So much information that is already available, and it's free. I'm a consultant. I tell people, don't come to me. There are free resources out there for you to understand how to do business with the federal government. There's also the Minority Business Development Agency, right? We all know that they're under the gun right now. It's for minority companies that want to do business in the federal government. They're for MBEs. The difference between the SBA and the MBDA is that the Minority Business Development Agency is for all size businesses that are minorities. They're going through some court challenges right now, but I think that's going to shake out okay, because even if it's not minority anymore, the plethora of resources that are available through MBDA, local MBDAs, Minority Business Development Agencies across the country, even if they're open for everybody, it's a tremendous resource. So the government is there to try to answer the how. We just need you to ask the question. Thank you.
And to follow, one of our audience members, they asked the question, does the SBA work with nonprofits? Do you have any idea?
Yes, the SBA will also work with nonprofits. And I'll tell you what, you could go to grants.gov and they also have guides, information. They lead you through the process. If you have never written a grant before, they have virtual classes, everything that's already there, right? I always say, and I tell people all the time, Google is my best friend. So go to grants.gov. It takes I always put your feet up, get a sip of your favorite adult beverage in the evening, right? And go through grants.gov. There is so much information as you peel back the onion. And that's why we get so excited, because the information is already there. You don't have to pay anybody. A way to start for you is to go to any of these agencies and or talk to Ben, right? One good thing about the pictures of the folks that he showed on the screen, they are tremendous resources. They have helped me so much, right? And to put them on blast, I will tell you, they've led me to specific opportunities. And Ron, to your point, I love the WeBe scenario. I work with a number of congressional representatives. And one thing that Congressman Kendrick Mead taught me a long time ago about folks that are congressional representatives that may have 4 years, he says, I like working with the WeBes. I said, what does that mean? He said, that means we be here when you get here and we be here when you're gone. Those are those civilian folks that are connected to the agency that will be there no matter who and what the administration is. Those are the people that really know and have the information. So thanks for reminding me of that. I had to sniggle a bit.
I want to emphasize what she said though about that. About the
I want to bring Ben back in. You mean Beverly, your excitement got me excited. I'm truly excited. Thanks for sharing it. And Ben, I want to bring you back in because a couple of things follow I want to touch on. You talked about there's a massive worker shortage. There are 14 million positions and only 6 million people applied for them. I guess that was
a couple years ago.
Okay, so my question: what is the current status of that? Number one, and number two, are the positions open to formerly incarcerated, directly impacted people?
Yeah, so there's so much that Beverly said that I want to touch on also. But before I go back to some of the great things that she shared, yes, there's still a worker shortage, and it's only going to get worse. There's a lot of demographic studies that are showing this, that the macroeconomic trends are actually what they call structural. It's not cyclical. It's not like it's just going to go away. It's going to get worse because people in their 70s and 60s are going to be retiring if they haven't retired already. And then there's a huge wave of people in their 50s that are starting to retire. And you can just Google that everywhere. And yes, opportunities are open to all sorts of people with different criminal backgrounds, from felonies to misdemeanors. I think one of the most frustrating things is how difficult that is to define, because some jurisdictions are more difficult and harsh on others, and you may have committed a crime from a simple mistake when you were young, and that may affect you in one district and not in another, and it is very, very hard and bewildering, and it's not fair. But there are a lot of good organizations that are there to help advocate and navigate those difficult processes to find exactly what situations exist. But I really like the way JL USA phrases this. I was an entrepreneur before I came into government, and build your own table.
Yeah.
Be your own boss. Have the grit. Now it's not easy. You can't just do that. You may have a couple years of living on ramen noodles before you get to that level to be self-sufficient, or you may need to contract for someone. But go the entrepreneurial route and build your own table. If someone's not inviting you to the table, man, just build it.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
I just want to add to that. I think that is really good advice. So I know that there are a number of construction companies, and one in particular, I haven't asked his permission, so I can't say it, but that's his mission. He's taking formerly incarcerated, right, and veterans. He's building his own table. Thank you, Ben. And because he is a prime contractor to the government. And what better way to sink your teeth into working with the government as an entrepreneur than to work with a smaller entrepreneur right now, where you can see all phases of the company, from operations to sales to marketing. You can actually take a look at it. I love working with smaller companies because you can see all of that. Thank you, Ben.
No, that's critical.
Ben, could you take us through career mapping a little bit? I mean, that's a great segue to career
Let's do the career mapping. Also, at the very end, I've got several stacks of links that, I meant to mention some of them before to set Beverly up. I highlighted something that she said that I was also thinking about talking about, which is about how you access these things, whether you're a larger or mid-sized business and you want to get into contracting, or you want to get into grants for the first time, or you're just an individual and you want to get into a career. There's several access points, and we've got a stack of links of government and non-government folks. We're not endorsing everyone that's out there, but I'm passionate about sharing resources and networking, and so I have permission to list them, but I'm not putting one over the other. Some of them have won prizes or grants or been awarded government contracts. Some of them haven't. Some of them have worked with different departments, and we'll highlight those too. But I also wanted to highlight something before the career map that Bev mentioned about unsolicited proposals. So this is an incredible change of government. 10 or 12 years ago, I was an entrepreneur in the Middle East doing sustainable agriculture, and I was working with USAID to implement different projects for peace and conflict resolution and sustainable agriculture to, showcase new and innovative technologies. And I started interfacing with USAID and some contractors and subcontractors that work with USAID to implement similar sustainable ag projects across the Middle East, mainly in Jordan. And the director of these programs and the grant officer at USAID, he was very cynical and very rude and mean. And I was a young, bright-eyed and ambitious idealist, living in a new culture, learning a new language. And he said to me, I want to paraphrase what he said, but he said something like 95% of all unsolicited proposals don't even get responses. There was no process for that, and now I cut it out just to save time. But there's a whole slide and there's a whole process for each program office. If you just Google, go back to the slide, look at what Bev presented, that phrase, unsolicited proposals. There are processes for the Department of Energy because we want that. And there's the other thing I want to say is it can be anxiety inducing applying for a job, applying for a grant, applying for a contract, but you need to know that the current administration has worked very hard to change that. So there's people like me that actually care. And some of the access points that Bev and I have been talking about, the MBDA, SBA, and others, Apex accelerators. There's another one called SCORE, which is a network of business coaches that work with the SBA. It was actually founded in Minneapolis, ironically. I just learned that where I just moved to. There are lots of individuals from all different cultures, all different backgrounds, all different specialties that it's either their job or they're volunteering to support you. And it's free service. It's really incredible. And that's been a major change in that they're more of a customer service outreach wing within the Department of Energy and other federal agencies. So let's go quick to, I think it was slide 22. To look at this career mapping. Yes. Okay. So this is nice. This is put on by the EERE. It's one of the program offices. I think we've mentioned it before, the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office. There's a lot of opportunities there. Because if you think energy efficiency and renewable energy, those are two very broad categories for careers, for projects, for funding opportunity announcements. But I'm just going to go back to share screen here. Let's see. Yep. Okay. So if you can see this, good. Okay. So we're all together. So when you go to this site to map a career in clean energy, this is not by any means, the end all be all. This is just an introduction to whet your appetite. I want to look at bioenergy because the nexus of agriculture and energy and sustainability is really exciting and interesting to me personally. And it often gets overlooked because we don't think of it as energy per se. So we'll just go to sciences. There's something for everyone. You can access this, from any angle. And so we go to the bioenergy career grid. So let's just go entry level. Natural resources technician, forestry technician, be a plant operator, a safety technician. These are all entry level positions, which means it's not that difficult to get started. So let's just see what a natural resource technician looks like. Okay, and this tool, again, is just an introduction, but it can show you, if you start here, there are upward mobility opportunities to move into higher forms of education, vocational certifications. But again, not everything is clear-cut. There's not a clear-cut case for every scenario, every crime, or every jurisdiction based on whatever background you have. And so you need to research this based on where you want to live and where you want to go. So again, natural resource technician, just a quick overview. This is 2-sentence, and then let's go to the job detail. So that'll take you to another page, and it'll talk more just about what is a natural resource technician. I mean, if you don't know, then you don't know. So there's different job titles here, 0 to 3 years experience. Okay, and again, just because you start working in this natural resource technician role doesn't mean you have to stay there. You develop a skill set, you meet someone, you build your own table, or, while you're on the job, you go to night school, you get a vocational degree, and then you've got these two wings. These are just great angles to get started. So I'm going to go back. It's a little bit slow. Yeah. Okay. So after this natural resource technician, let's say, I've done some time, I've gotten a degree. Now I'm able to do natural resource management specialist because you're just really into nature and you love working there. There are descriptions and details of what sort of career path and educational opportunities, are necessary to get to that level. Okay. So I want to go back again. We talk about solar. Everyone often just thinks, man, solar, okay, what am I, just installing solar panels? But no, again, there's several opportunities and openings and entry points up and down the entire supply chain. And so when you get started, there's many angles and directions to go. So you're starting with construction, but then you branch over to, you can be an installer, you can be a site supervisor, management, leadership. You can become an electrician. Like I said, there's different programs. I know of a couple, one in Florida, one in Massachusetts. They're doing a great job of helping a variety of folks with different backgrounds, and also New Hampshire, go from solar installer to journeyman electrician. And that's just an incredible, stable job. Then I want to go back here. What was the one? I think you get the idea here, but there was one that just showed a lot more opportunities at the entry level. Okay. Anyways, you get the idea. This is just a way to get started. If we could go back to stop sharing screen here, or maybe let's just go back to the PowerPoint. And then if you could go to the next slide, please. I'm curious what order these are in again. Okay, so I talked about the access points. Here's the beginning of a great list of opportunities. So if you want to understand some of more in depth of contractor acquisition forecasts, like Beverly said, there's set asides for different groups. If you're a minority owned business, a woman owned business, service disabled veteran owned business, there are different set asides and quotas, and you can see the acquisition forecasts of what the Department of Energy has already taken on for the next fiscal year, and say, this is not the right time for my business. I'm going to pivot somewhere else because X percentage has already been filled, and maybe I wouldn't feel as competitive this year versus next year. The access point for a lot of those of you who don't know is to get registered in sam.gov. I was having some internet difficulties, and I know I didn't mention, I meant to earlier, but I don't know if Bev mentioned it, so forgive me. But like we said, if you go to some of these sites, whether it's the MBDA, the local MBDA, by the way, this is a federal agency that's located in many of the country's largest cities and geographic regions across the country, and they have other subcontractors that also work with them. Then the SBA is similar. There's local city sites. A lot of these folks do this initial work development with you, helping you get registered with SAMS.gov. It's just a great way to start and get some free help and advice. If we go to the next slide, please. I think we need to go down. Yeah, let's skip all the way down then to my last section where I had the stack of, okay. So we've mentioned Apex Accelerator number 2, SBA, the Development Center, MBDA, we mentioned that. OSDBU is another wing. Most government offices have the Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization. Again, minority business development is for businesses owned by minorities, but OSDBU is just for small and disadvantaged business utilization, largely getting into contracting and acquisition. So we talked about acquisition forecasts, small business program managers directory, and then of course understanding your NAICS codes. That's going to be kind of step 2 down. If you look at the second to last link here, the North American Industry Classification System, there are also forecast lists to say, here's what NAICS codes have been most competitive last year or upcoming in this quarter. Here's what we've already awarded contracts to. So you can say, actually I could pivot a little bit, and my company's capable of taking on another NAICS code and updating our capability statement, and the MBDA or local SBA representative is going to guide me with this process. And then I'm positioned to be competitive for a whole different set aside contract grant, et cetera. And so understanding those is important. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I want to just kind of broaden out the horizon from Department of Energy. So I mentioned the USEER, that's looking at labor trends, but the Department of Labor's ETA, they have incredible resources. A couple that I'd like to highlight is the Reentry Employment Opportunities #3. There's several grantees that work in specific ways to develop and prepare people for the next step coming out of incarceration. You got to explore that. We don't have enough time to go in depth on it. But of course, the Department of Labor's kind of local access point are the American Job Centers. And I want to say this too, sometimes you may have a bad experience. You may get someone on an off day, maybe they're a little bit grumpy, they didn't have their coffee. Well, don't give up. Go the next day. I know in Minneapolis, St. Paul is right next door. It's a short drive. You know, just because you had one kind of grumpy customer service experience working, you know, with the American Job Centers, and I'm not trying to beat up on Department of Labor, you know, we're brothers here, sister organizations. I'm just saying, for example, you may get someone who's just having an off day. You know, it doesn't matter. Go back the next day. And it's a learning process, right? Do not give up. Do not give up. There are hundreds of employees of the American government that are passionate about solving these problems. There are. And then if you look down to the third to last link, small business loans, sometimes, I failed to mention this earlier, sometimes a grant will require you to have some sort of a matching contribution. So Lendistry is an organization that our office, the Office of Energy, Justice, and Equity, just formed an agreement with, where I don't know the terms of, you know, whatever their term sheets are. Each loan is different for each industry, but basically this is an affordable CDFI, an affordable bank, basically, to help you get some of the funds necessary if your grant requires you to bring some money to the table, because sometimes that happens. And then we could talk for hours about both the 8A program and the Mentor Protege program. Bev just introduced it a little bit from the contracting side, but you know, some of the, like, inside baseball, this is by no means a guarantee of winning funding, but prizes I mentioned earlier and grants are a little bit different. This is kind of key. So again, I'm not a grants expert, but I do review applications and help folks with their community benefits plans. But if you think a prize is designed for what? It's designed to help folks that have not done business with the government, but have innovative ideas and opportunities and solutions to get access to some of the funds to help their business or help their community, right? So people that review prizes are generally looking for newcomers. So if you find an amazing prime contractor and this guy or this gal has just been rocking it and they've got 10 years experience, they're the best name on campus, or the prettiest girl in the room, as Bev says, you don't want to lead with them if you're going into a prize, because the idea is for the prize to bring money and resources and opportunities to those who haven't experienced it before. If you say, though, this massive, you know, prime contractor is supporting me in these select services, it may help your application look more competitive. The inverse is often true with grants, though. Okay. A grant, they often look for a more established track record with experience, whether they're the formula grants or the discretionary grants that come out based on different program offices' needs. But if you say, hey, here's this coalition of folks, they're going to service this angle of the community benefits plan. These guys are going to, you know, set up an apprenticeship for energy efficiency upgrades. But really, it's a whole supply chain deal, because we've got a micro factory here for solar panels. And then we've got folks that are also going to do the HVAC and the installation and LED installations. And they can see, oh, wow, this organization. And then you've got a local church or mosque that's also going to do pre-apprenticeship and mentorship for folks coming out of incarceration, so they can get access to the licenses, the different needs. The grant officers and the prize reviewers are going to say, wow, that's very robust and unique and diverse. And we see the experience that prime contractor has goes to the subcontractor or the partner in the joint venture. And it's a great way. So if you understand down, again, what reminded me that I hadn't shared that yet was the last link there, the Mentor Protege program. If you understand that process with the SBA, that same mentality of forming joint ventures to pursue grants, also tax credits and prizes, is same for other program offices within the Department of Energy. So it's really essential how you structure that. And Bev has way more experience than I do. I just really wanted to highlight that. If we go to the next slide, please. We're coming to our end here. Okay, and then one more slide, please, just to see what is after this. Good. Okay, back one more, please. Now, this is something that I could have added a lot more here, but these are some of the organizations that I've either worked with directly or have researched or read about. So this is a personal list, but also it's a list from others in my office that we're aware of good work being done specifically for second chance hiring or reentry or returning citizens from incarceration. Okay, so any layer of justice involved, we're aware of work being done across the nation. Some of them here have won government funds or Department of Energy funds, grants, prizes, tax credits, loans, etc. Some of them haven't, and this is not an endorsement. I'm not trying to make one better than the other. These are just examples of things across the nation that are being done to serve some of the most vulnerable people in our society that have great opportunities that are just overlooked. So I want to highlight a couple of them. There's something here for all the major aspects of our audience. I intentionally mix them in to make you kind of look for them. So if you're an employer and you want to learn more about strategies in the macroeconomic business case for how to make this hiring process succeed, there is a method to this. Your HR department needs to have social workers involved. And there's a whole business strategy to that. And so if you look at kind of in the middle of the left, there's JBM Packaging. They have a great case study. Nehemiah Manufacturing also has a great case study. Those two are some of the leaders in not necessarily industry, but in manufacturing and packaging that, if you skip down, Jeffrey Korzenik, the economist and author, highlights in his book, Untapped Talent, which is an incredible manual on, if you're a business leader, how do I make this happen? If you're a utility, there's a lot of folks doing this as well. Somewhere you can see DTE towards the top. DTE and Goodwill formed Greenworks Incorporated. So if you're a nonprofit or a community-based organization, there's a lot of resources here for you as well. I wish we had more time to talk about all of these, but the last two I'll highlight, and then I really want to hear Bev's comments because I've talked way too much. She's the expert here. But if you think about this, a lot of folks say, okay, second chance hiring might mean second rate. And so sadly, there's a lack of studies because a lot of the businesses that do this are worried about this false stigma. And one of my passions is to destigmatize second chance hiring, because if you can get your hands on the Johns Hopkins, and I tried to find it, I don't see it listed here. I don't see it listed here. Shoot. Well, I can post it later, but I couldn't find a link for the study. But Johns Hopkins Healthcare it's a little over 15 years old, but they did a study showing over a 5-year period of time that second chance hiring actually were more productive and had far less turnover than traditional hires. And if you think, okay, Johns Hopkins University, this is one of the top university systems in the nation. So second chance is not second rate. In this case, objectively studied, and there's many other business studies, second chance is more successful because the people that get in these roles are sometimes far more qualified after all the work they've done just to get to the table. Okay. Another one is The Source. It's a nonprofit in Michigan funded by a group of, I think, about 25 area businesses. And their mission was to create, an HR model specializing in different communities and representatives from refugees or single mothers or disabled veterans or folks returning from incarceration that had different needs that the traditional HR system couldn't understand. And so they created together a nonprofit. And the study in 2022 showed that they had a 329% return on their investment. 329%. So again, these 25 businesses said, hey, our HRs can't do this by themselves, but we're going to come together and cooperate and create one together. And they rocked it. And so that should be listed there. There are so many resources here that I worked really hard to kind of pull together. There's Prison Entrepreneurs Program if you want to, again, build your own table. There's so many opportunities from the education angle, from workforce development. So I want to pause, let Beverly comment on all the other resources I shared there. Sure.
I think we're out of time, but I think you've done a great job.
Absolutely.
No, we've got time. We've got time.
To that point, Beverly, I'm wondering what are some of the best practices are to pursuing some of these opportunities that have been highlighted today. From your perspective, what are some essentials that our participants should consider when applying to contracting roles for both the federal government and the energy sector? What are your thoughts?
I think, first of all, I think the reference list that Ben provided is absolutely excellent. If I was in a situation, I would go directly there to see what's there. But in the federal government, I think we mentioned SAM.gov. SAM.gov is also a resource that shows all of the government contracting opportunities that you can bid on over a certain dollar amount. Right. So I've got one going on right now for about 8 million. It's something that I'm bidding on. I got to compete for it. So if you go to sam.gov, they also, it's a platform that provides you with, if you know how to put in the correct search terms for what your company does or what you want to do, it will give you a list of the agency that has a requirement for what it is that you are looking to sell to the federal government. It is a great place to start. I also believe in going through some of the information that the SBA has, but many people use the sam.gov as a way to look for opportunities. And something else that happens in the federal government, before a requirement gets to the request for proposal stage, they do something called sources sought. Right? We're looking for sources. They may even say we're looking for women-owned small businesses, or we're looking for service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. And if you don't respond, they're going to say, who are you? What do you do? How big are you? They're going to ask you for some basic information. If you respond with that basic information and more than one as service-disabled veteran-owned small business, or more than one woman-owned small business, or more than one HUBs-owned small business replies, they will take that out of a general category and they will set it aside so that only that category of companies can respond to the requirement. That's exciting. They're limiting the competitive field. And I've heard some people say, well, I want to compete with everybody else. No, you don't. Large companies don't want to compete with everybody else. They're all looking for a strategic market advantage. And if you are a small business, and if you're looking to do business with the federal government, that is your strategic market advantage, because the government has resources for you and a pathway for you to enter into the federal government by responding to a sources sought or responding to a request for information before it goes to a request for proposal. We spend a lot of time, and so will anybody that you work with, shaping the requirement so that you are leveraging what you can do. I hear people saying, well, you know what? Well, by the time it gets to an RFP, it's already done. Well, if you respond to the request for information or the sources sought, then that's your opportunity to shape the requirement. The government is looking to increase its industrial base of small business because they lost so much ground during the pandemic. They're looking for new entrants to small business programs because we have to shore up our capacity for buying from small business, because small business is the number one employer. So all the things that Ben talked about, those are the creative companies and pathways that are looking for people who may not have a straight golden path, but they're looking for that diversity of employment, right? I just read something the other day where there's going to be 175,000 folks that are going to be released from incarceration that were involved in selling marijuana, which is now legal. So they're trying to find pathways for these people to do business in the federal government. And many of those resources that Ben showed on the screen, they're ready, they're positioning, they're getting ready for those folks. So I hope people do partake. You're on mute, Ron.
I'm sorry. For any of our audience that have questions, would you put them in the chat so we can field some of the questions during Q&A? And while we were waiting for the questions, in 60 seconds or less, could each one of you share your thoughts on what are some of the biggest misconceptions related to employment in the energy sector?
In the energy sector or reentry?
In the energy sector.
I mean, the biggest misconception is that, in my experience, is that it's tough, it's dirty, and it's not going to pay well, and it's not dignifying, and and I think that's just silly. I think so. I've had a variety of jobs from blue collar to white collar, and there's something so satisfying about working with your hands. And if it's not satisfying to work with your hands and learn these skills and to be a capable person to take care of your environment and fix things around you, there's also the money side. Some folks are getting $100 an hour for entry-level positions, and it's mind-boggling. I mean, it's wonderful, entry level. And so, like, I love working with my environment and tinkering on stuff. And the more things you learn, the more capable you are to take care of your environment. But if that's not a motivation, let the money be a motivation.
Yeah, I agree. Just to say more on that, I believe that work is work, the dignity of work. But here we have an opportunity, and I think this is happening across the employment sector, right? Whenever there's a scarcity of anything, whenever it's the laws of just simple economic supply and demand. So now you have industry in our country coming to you saying, listen, we need you to participate in the energy sector. And I think one of the misconceptions is that there's only one or two different path. There's so many opportunities that exist there. And I would look directly at the public utilities, and I would look at companies that contract with the public utilities.
Yes, utilities is I mean, there are so many angles. Another misconception is that just because the government is expanding, decarbonization, there's going to be no opportunities for oil and gas. And a lot of good leaders in utilities and oil and gas are realizing they need to diversify. And so there's clean energy jobs within fossil fuels. And so don't overlook the fossil fuel careers. There's opportunities everywhere. There's opportunities everywhere. Yeah. And also, the power of your story. The power of your story. Tell your story. Social mobility. If you can effectively tell your story, that's more compelling, and show your integrity. That's more compelling than a couple of years in a white collar job, or a couple of years in a blue collar job, or a gap in your resume because of some sort of criminal justice involvement. Like, telling your story is very, very powerful.
Absolutely. I agree. We're telling a story now about a gentleman who is recycling tires. He's taking the metal from tires, right? Just a small, started out as a one-man business. He's telling a story. He did an unsolicited proposal. Fantastic. There's another gentleman who is collecting batteries and smashing up the batteries for cobalt, right? And it's so many opportunities. These guys are going to be millionaires just from looking at what's around them and understanding the opportunities in the federal sector. And these are not great, big, gargantuan business people. These are folks that have worked talked to the Department of Energy, who's gone on some websites, who look at what's needed, and they're fulfilling that need, and they're getting grants and contracts as well as other opportunities to participate.
Absolutely. This has been an amazing conversation, and I can't thank our esteemed panelists enough. So as we draw our time to a close here today, I want to start by first thanking our incredible guests, Ben Horn and Beverly Kirkendall. You guys are absolutely amazing, and I am confident that the opportunities and expertise shared here today will lead to a deeper understanding for everyone who attended and participated. As a reminder, resources from today's sessions will be passed out by email to those who attended, and will be available on our website as well. The email will also include a survey to gather your feedback and how we can continue to bring resources to you and your communities to create maximum collective impact. Lastly, if you or a member of your circle would benefit from today's sessions, or like today's sessions, or other resources for policy and advocacy, please remember to check our website, justuscc.org, and share the opportunity to join the JCC. And with that, my esteemed guests, do you have a closing thought or words you'd like to share with our audience before we close?
Ron, I'd just like to thank you for the caliber and the quality and the type of work that you do to reach so many people. It's just essential and it's necessary. And we need angels like you in the organization to keep carrying this message forward. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Ben?
The last word I would say, in addition to the story and thanking everyone, is everyone knows this is the right thing. Second chances is the ethical argument. Not everyone agrees with that, but in our core, everyone feels it's just right to have a second chance. And so know that in yourself, as you're seeking an opportunity, seeking a job, start building your company, that there are those who are merciful and understand and want to get to know your story and want to make a difference. And second of all, if they don't agree with the ethical position or the moral position, the economy needs you. The country needs you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So know that. Be motivated by that. Be encouraged by that. And keep up the good work.
Thank you, Ben. And for our audience, I'll remind you of our motto that those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So step
Yes.
up, become part of the solution, tell your story, share your expertise, and make a difference in our community and our country. And on behalf of Just Leadership and our President and CEO, Deanna Hoskins, we thank you for joining and we bid you adieu. Thank you, everybody.
Keep up the fight, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.